they may be energized and even may have an interest that develops. Um, Everything from not having the awareness and not having the exposure early to even just their peers can be a pinch point in terms of discouraging them rather than encouraging them. Um, but if they can just get exposure, right? If they can just uh, get a bite of the apple and just have that seed planted, as you can see here, right? Young women, underrepresented talent, 10 times more likely, 7 times more likely, um, respectively, if we can just make these exposure opportunities happen. Okay, Co, we can go on to the next one. So these are just some recent updates. Again, backdrop, hopefully, but if not, didn't want to be presumptuous. Um, so in terms of letting you know, right, um, how things are moving, again, Bryan Cox did a phenomenal job in working with industry, working with an advisory committee, and putting together some K through 8 standards. Co, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. K through 8 standards, and ensuring that those will now be in place and they are in alignment with and definitely feed up into the standards that already exist from a high school perspective. So now K through 12, fully across the board, which gives us another check mark, right, on the code.org list of those 9 um, principles that they recommend states have to really express and identify that they are truly committed to computer science education and equity in computer science education. So we just wanted to make sure, one, you knew about this because it passed in March, so it still hasn't been that long. You can definitely go to the DOE's website to grab the information behind those standards, as well as the rollout plan that will eventually be provided as well. But even these courses, right, that you can see here at the middle school level, are reflective of just the evolution in terms of content that the DOE is trying to bring forward. So why is this relevant? So if we have all this in play, right, but it's still happening sporadically, this is where SB 108 comes into play and can help move the ball forward even further by making it, I hate to use the word mandate, but really identifying that by 2025, there really needs to be a pressure point and a commitment to all schools having some level of computer science curriculum um, in play and available. High school as well as in middle school is highly relevant, is extremely relevant. The content is already out there, but now you have, from a legislative perspective, from a government perspective, the influence of that happening as well. And the other really phenomenal part about SB 108 is quite honestly the funding that comes with it. Because again, I'm sure we all know it's one thing to want this to happen, but the real essence of bringing it to fruition is capacity and ensuring that teachers are trained, teachers are available to actually deliver and bring this content to fruition. So that's the really phenomenal piece. Cole, we can push ahead. That's the really phenomenal piece about, you can go to the next one too, about SB 108 is the fact that there's funding that's attached to it. There's timing, funding, and commitment that's attached to it. All of those were really thought through by the whole team that I mentioned who came together for quite a few months, quite honestly, in front of this current legislative season, or this past legislative season. This committee was already in place and trying to think through the bullets, trying to think through the data points, trying to think through, okay, what makes sense? Okay, what represents equity? Um, um, what represents success and how do we measure it? Trying to incorporate all that in thinking through a bill that hopefully would be passed. The other part of that process was identifying again who would be the right champions. Again, thankfully, Senator P.K. Martin, through great relationships that existed with people like Tim Carl and people like Asina with College Board, their relationships, their direct relationships enabled that work of content gathering and infrastructure development being put in front of the right people. as the chairman of the Education Committee, Senate Education Committee, he definitely served as that champion. But what was also energizing to see was the lieutenant governor jump in immediately. Uh, Probably everything given from just his background and his educational pedigree to just what he's taken on as a personal platform. Um, he immediately, as it was progressing through the process, he would consistently put press releases out there and identifying points out there, and even just most recently, um, at the signing, right, the day of the signing, a press release where the quote to the left, 1/2 of 1% is not okay. Making the point that this was done very intentionally, and that the support it was given was very intentional as well. So I'll just stop rambling and definitely let you look at the bullets that are there, right, and see again a reiteration of some of the components of SB 108 and what it represents. So we'll push forward. We'll definitely push forward onto the next slide, Code. So these are some of the plans, right? Again, the work isn't done just because it's been passed. Um, Now there comes the fun part, right? Of one, monitoring and supporting successful implementations, using opportunities like this, as well as all of our individual circles of influence to create awareness that it exists in districts and most specifically in schools, so that they can rally behind that and start being their own voice. Like, being able to say, hey, we know this passed. What does that mean for us? When does this come to fruition for us? What's now our game plan to make this active in our particular school? Having that awareness is huge, because otherwise, people could pretend like it actually didn't happen. But the more we champion it, the more we create synergistic voices around it, the more it makes it a little more impossible for people to deny that it's there and that it's supposed to be coming to fruition. Um, Implementing the strategic plan for CS for Georgia, which clearly has a policy aspect to it. Continuing to engage policymakers so that we ensure that, again, beyond just the passing that happened in 2019, that they're continuing to keep an eye on it. If we need further appropriations to be associated with it, working with Dr. McGivney in the DOE, who owns policy for the DOE. Just everybody that's a major stakeholder and has an opportunity to ensure that this doesn't fall short and doesn't fall dead. Making sure that we're doing what we can to keep them engaged. And then, like I mentioned, inviting all of you to be very active in this whole the next steps forward, right? So success stories, so that we can highlight them and promote them on all the different mediums that are available, like the CS for Georgia website. We have Tag Ed, we have an online magazine that is distributed to over 200,000 monthly. So by any and all venues and mediums that are available, bringing your stories to life and putting them out there. Okay, Co, we can go to the next slide. That was actually just a good segue into that. For any of you where you don't, particularly right, where you're in an environment where having these computer science courses are currently not in your school systems, um, when they do come in, tracking so that we are keeping a fresh count and a very relevant and current count of where this is happening. Uh, Bryan is phenomenal, but he needs people to feed that information to him, right? He does everything imaginable to stay on top of that. Co with CS for Georgia, you all know how engaged and how on board Co is about staying on top of information, but a lot of it has to be very much a proactive aspect from everybody a part of um, that's a part of this web conversation today, and those who are not a part of this web conversation today. Co does a great job of putting these PowerPoints and this information in the hands of those who attended, but even those who were invited. So please, please, please don't hesitate to, again, be that champion, be that voice, ensure that from a local, state, and federal perspective, you're engaging your representatives. Bring them to your district, right? They voted for it. That's phenomenal. On the Senate side, it was unanimous. But bring them into your district so they can see it firsthand, so they can see exactly what does success look like, so they can see the engagement of the students, so they can see the value add that's being created. Because, again, sometimes this can be a little distant for folks. They may not make the one-to-one association. So make it real for them. Please make it very real for them. And absolutely, from an AP perspective, as those courses are being implemented, we most certainly want to continue to highlight the students, the success stories, the numbers. Again, particularly going back to some of the earlier slides in terms of underrepresented students, in terms of young women, making those numbers real as well. Those are all the ways that you can help. Um, there will be contact information available. Co, I think you can go to the next slide, that will identify how you can reach out and engage with us. The site is always one. Um, Tim and I serve as co-chairs of this coalition, so I'm definitely willing to make my email address available, Co, when you push this information out, and I'm sure Tim might be as also, but we do want to ask him first. But please, please, and pretty please, your engagement, your involvement, your support. Um, we there's a gap that we will continue to not be able to close, if we're not doing our part. There were a lot of comments that came up in the chat, so hopefully you all saw each other's comments. Great dialogue that was happening there. I couldn't speak to them, but I definitely want you to know that I saw them, and I'm just hoping everybody else that's on today's Zoom call has been paying attention to this as well, to each other, and to the thoughts, and to the great comments. Um,
Great. And this is the website that Errika was referencing. So if you've not been to our website, click on Join Us Now, and you'll start getting updates from us. Let us know if there's any problems in receiving MailChimp messages. This phone number goes to Bryan's phone, and this email goes to me. So as you can tell, we're all just sharing responsibilities here. We need to update our data. In fact, where Bryan and I are behind in getting our face. Hey, look, we got a tweet. This is a tweet from our. So this is what Errika was referencing. So we try to stay current and automate some of these things. We have a great person in Kendall Rainey who helps us with keeping us updated. But we'll be having somebody work on our website to add some more stuff. But Bryan and I will talk about it another time. So I'm going to stop sharing. And
Well, and Co, there were
yeah,
some questions. So there was one question that I want to allow Bryan to answer. I don't know if you saw it, Bryan, the one about, and I know you're muted right now, but the one about certification, and then I'll answer the next question that I saw in terms of the funding and when does that begin.
great.
So I was typing an answer to that one.
Oh, I got you. I'm sorry.
But
Okay, my bad.
it's better to be audible. So after June of this summer, to teach high school computer science courses, you're required to have a computer science certification, a computer science endorsement. Although a lot of the engineering certifications will still be valid as well, but a science certification, math certification, business certification for most of the computer science courses will no longer be considered in fields. In middle school, we don't have a computer science requirement at this point. I'm imagining that it will come eventually, but right now I'm just encouraging people to go ahead and get endorsed to teach middle school, even though it's not required yet. So.
In regards to the funding, so overall, it has a 3-year outlook, right? So it's broken up over the 3-year period, but ideally for the funding to begin this upcoming school year, so that teachers can take advantage of that for things like getting the certifications, and have the opportunity both for existing this. So this is funding that is here to support existing teachers and being able to pursue that certification, as well as those who are in a pre-service status, and supporting some of the programming and development that's happening in that space as well, because we recognize that we want to be able to tap into teachers before they even come out and get into the field. So And again, that's why it's very relevant to stay engaged with these policymakers, right? Because the reality is, given the number of teachers that we have currently and the number of teachers that are actually needed to make this a reality, we don't have enough that are in the pipeline. So it takes an effort of both taking existing teachers who may want to, tack on or transition from being math teachers, science teachers, and getting that certification to actually teach computer science as well. So leveraging that existing workforce, but also tapping into and supporting what would be the potential workforce. But that money will run out. And if we know anything, we know that much. But again, we're very blessed and truly appreciate the fact that appropriations were already identified and attached to it from the beginning. But that's why it does take a continual conversation and engagement to ensure that money is is steadily being placed there. And I do want to give credit to just some of like the partners that I mentioned, um, uh, Code.org, Project Lead the Way, um, organizations like Seismic. All of these organizations, right, offer opportunities for education and professional development. And like right now, Code.org has a scholarship out there available for teachers that can offset the cost of them getting that PD. So I don't want to be remiss, one, because they were absolutely a part of the team. And so they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk, right? To use kind of a phraseology that's out there, and putting their dollars and their commitment and showing their commitment financially as well. So again, through your respective circles and in circles of influence and in the contacts that you have, you'll see that link, as a matter of fact, in our online magazine that will be coming out, uh, should be coming out tomorrow. But that's just an example of the types of opportunities that are out there and available. For any teachers that are premium members with CSTA, um, Pluralsight is a company that has a partner relationship with CSTA. And for teachers that have that premium membership, there is a plethora of languages and training and development that's available to them for free online. So here again, please share that out. I never want to presume that people already know these things. I'd rather just put it out there and let it be repetitive information, just on the off chance that it's new information for somebody.
Great. And we've got some other questions here. There was a statement about content is already out there. Bryan, this might be for you. Can you expand on that? Do you anticipate need for publishers to provide aligned content, or is the state creating its own?
So the state is not going to create a content around the standards. We create some examples and some supportive documents for teachers based on the particulars of the standards. But there's way too much content that's available on the internet now. April appropriately said that there's a lot of free stuff that's available. There's a lot of good quality content. I think now that we have standards for K-8, you'll start to see vendors and other companies and such align some of their content with our standards. So that's one of the benefits of having standards, is that it kind of gives vendors and people a target to aspire to. But yeah, I read an article once that the title of the article was 438 ways you can learn coding online. And so just being able to go through all of that is challenging and it can be overwhelming. Hopefully we can help with some of that on CS4GA, website later on this year. But yeah, there's a lot of content. Nothing's going to be created by the state. Georgia is completely local control, and that's something maybe we can talk a little bit about, Erika, regarding the SB 108, is the fact that it is a local control state. So every district will be adopting it in their own shape, fashion, or form, their own time frame.
Yes. And you're right, Bryan. I mean, that's why it really requires, watchdogs is considered a kind of a harsh descriptor, but from the point of making sure that we're all paying attention to and engaging and keeping an eye on what we hope to be and what we hope to come to fruition, right? So everything from alignment to standards to just because of the autonomy. That's something I tell people all the time about Georgia. The autonomy that exists means that we absolutely have to make an appeal to, right, and stay engaged in and be very just direct to the districts. I was having Bryan, to your point, I was having a conversation with a vendor who was like, well, maybe the DOE could do it, and I just had to stop them at the start of their conversation, and it was like, the DOE absolutely provides standards, recommendations. They give perspectives around what's expected in terms of content and curriculum and professional development and that type of thing. But at the end of the day, these districts have an opportunity to decide what that's going to look like. So in terms of this actually rolling out and coming to fruition and holding folks accountable, that's why we appreciate you taking the time to listen in and learn more about just generally speaking, what's now out there.
Wonderful. And Bryan, in Rhode Island, for example, let me share this with folks as we chat about it. So I've shared with, for those of you just joined, this is our website. Please go to csforgeorgia.org. And I'm not sharing my screen yet. Let me share my screen so you know what I'm talking about. This is our website, so please go and join so you can stay updated. Bryan, when we looked at CS for Rhode Island, our sister state, this is, for those who don't know, this is where I live now, and I've been to their summit. I've been chatting. Bryan and I have had conversations with their team, led by their DOE and University of Rhode Island and a couple of other folks. They have, Bryan, they have their curriculum and their standards, and they have information on alignment by vendors to their in terms of the curriculum and how it's let's see, where did it go for schools overview standards. And so will we be asking folks vendors to show how they're aligned with our standards? I will be trying to create that in Georgia, is where people can go and see, oh, which vendors are aligned with which standards, so that here we go in the interactive table. So this is what they created in Rhode Island. Is this something, Bryan, that you think something like this we could create here? It doesn't have to be exact same thing, but how do vendors know where to go and what process to go through, and to show folks that they're, that they are aligned, and how do schools find out what is aligned and not what is not aligned?
Yeah, we definitely look forward to having on the CS for Georgia site something that helps vendors and schools come together, so that they can see what options are out there and what challenges they address. Is this vendor relevant for elementary school or middle school or high school? What courses they support, things like that, and what they're aligned to. Whether they're aligned to our state standards or the CSTA standards. I think these are the CSTA standards here. It helps, because otherwise it can get very overwhelming. April was saying earlier that teachers live now in the YouTube world, where they look for their professional development in video format, because it makes it much more accessible. And that's one of the reasons why these Zoom calls are very effective, because after they get completed here, CS for Georgia has a YouTube site where people can go back and look and say, oh, what am I missing out on? What am I catching up on? So being able to connect all the different contexts, the PD providers, the vendors, the teachers and districts, everybody can come to common spaces and get the information that they need in an easy to digest format.
Great.
Hopefully.
Great. People, if somebody is having trouble putting their questions in the chat function, does anybody want to ask a question verbally? If they're having trouble, feel free to speak and you can ask your question. Does anybody have it? I'm going to pause for a second just to let anybody else who has a question who would like to ask it verbally. Anyone want to ask a question before we keep going? Okay. Feel free to chime in, but we're going to be looking for you to post your questions in the chat function. That way we sort of keep it organized, but if you're having trouble, feel free to ask it. So that when we talk about video-based tutorial, Bryan, what do you see as the options in the future? Could we do some professional development? Are you aware of, or maybe Chris Thompson or Chris Yurt or somebody, some of the vendors? So let me just open it up beyond you, Bryan. Chris Thompson, Chris Yurt, anybody else, Lauren? We've got a lot of expertise and others that I'm not mentioning. Casey, guys, what are people's thoughts on PD as we start to go statewide and we try to scale up? There's a lot of cost involved in face-to-face trainings. There's some challenges to do things online, trainings, but is there a possibility our vendors and trainers trying to see if we could do things online that could be effective PD?
This is Chris Used from CompuScholar. I can take a stab at it. So there's certainly a place for face-to-face PD and folks that want to get together in a personal environment. We provide an alternative that's entirely online, where it's just a self-paced, go through our curriculum at your own pace. So teachers that want to do that, it's free for those teachers. So it's a low-cost alternative to flying people around and renting rooms and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of options out there. It's just a matter of what the teachers prefer.
Got it. Great. And anybody else want to share on the online training availability?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So this is Lauren Margello at Georgia State, and so I have sort of two areas of expertise. One is computer science education, and the other is online learning, which is a good mix for what we're trying to do, especially as Georgia is a largely rural state, where our computer science endorsement is starting up next year as a partly online, partly face-to-face course or curriculum. But we're trying as fast as we can to get to those online components, because even for people in the metro area, it can be difficult to get downtown. So we think of online as not the only future, but the primary method of delivery going forward.
Great. And what do you see, Lauren, since we have you on stage for 1 second? I'm going to make you the primary screen for a second. So Lauren, if you could, what do you think is going to be required of schools and teachers to successfully participate with good outcomes in an online training environment versus face-to-face? Because there's pros and cons to each. But if you guys see that's where a lot of, not all, but a lot of the future opportunities going, particularly if you're trying to do statewide engagement. There's technology challenges with broadband issues. When Bryan and I went to visit our partners in South Georgia, in Thomas, Ben Hill, and Brooks counties, a lot of concerns around broadband issues. So what do you see beyond, let's say, the technology issues? What other things could teach? Actually, I'll let you speak to whatever you want to speak to take advantage of this, to get ready for it. And then I guess related to that, what do we need to improve in our system so we can address some of those challenges?
So I'll talk about two sort of areas that we're focusing on at Georgia State. One is related to a technology issue, recognizing that not every school district is able to afford a robot or a Sphero or these sorts of cool computing tools that help people learn, but are inaccessible to some people. So we're focusing on using only web-based computing tools so that anyone, even if they only have a Chromebook or an iPad, can access the materials that we're teaching them. And the other part is explicitly teaching our candidates to communicate about computer science and about programming in an online scenario. Because even if you are in the metro area, chances are if you're the computer science person at your school, you're probably the only computer science person at your school. So there's not a department like you would have a department if you were a math teacher or a science teacher. There's not a department at your school where you can share practices, get help from other people. And so being able to communicate in an online way with people who aren't at your school, whether you're in a metro or rural area, is going to be crucial to helping the teachers succeed once they're in the classrooms.
Great. Thank you. And just a reminder to everybody, we are recording this video so that when we're done with this presentation, we will be sharing this with everybody through MailChimp. Any other questions? Yeah, so we saw some. Yes, please go ahead, Erika.
I just wanted to add another bill that was actually passed this legislative season that correlates to what we just talked about. It's a broadband bill that was also passed this legislative season.
Oh, could you tell us more about that?
Sure. So it was a bill that also came up in the Senate. The Senate majority with Steve Gooch was the primary sponsor of that bill. And basically it allows Georgia's 41 EMCs or electric membership corporations to plug in and to get into the broadband business, and specifically targeting in rural areas, which at this point they calculate serving about 4 million customers. Again, this is all awareness, right? But by increasing this broadband deployment, it clearly has a positive impact, or I say clearly, hopefully will have a positive impact from an education perspective as well, for our educators that are in more rural areas, being able to have greater access points as this is deployed. Obviously, it'll take a minute for it to be deployed, but here again, this was another one where Lieutenant Governor Duncan was a huge champion of bringing it to fruition, because he saw this as impacting our economic future. And in fact, his quote was, "Broadband access is critical to Georgia's economic future." It's a step towards creating more digital access to both educationally and as well as economically. But just since that had come up in the conversation just now, I again just wanted to make sure everybody on the call was aware of that also passing this past legislative season.
Wonderful. Erika or Bryan, could you all talk? I didn't see any new questions, guys, so please, reminder, if you have any questions, post them in chat or just speak up, unmute yourself and speak up, and we'll take your questions. By the way, for 20 people on this call, I'm so appreciative of people reducing all that background noise. We usually often have problems with that, so appreciation for everybody respecting that. Could you guys speak to what's next in terms of the implementation process? Will this be similar to the middle school grant from last year that the DOE, I think it was CTAE who put out the grant last year, Bryan? How much money? We heard that $1 million was proposed. Do we know what the final number is, guys? And will that be all in 1 year? Will it go over, that number will be over the next 5 years? And will it be DOE again? And which department in DOE will, which office within DOE will handle I'm assuming, the grant making process? And when do we anticipate finally sort of an announcement that funds are available for the relevant uses?
A lot of questions, Co. So the middle school grant went out last year. There was another one that went out again this year, and it was through CTAE. As a matter of fact, the due date was a couple of days ago. It was on the 1st. So those have already come back in, and I'm going to go and help review those tomorrow. I'll be spending my whole day. We're looking at doing something similar, having those conversations about what to do at the DOE regarding to the new appropriations with the new grants. So we're looking at a similar model. But we're having those conversations now. I had some last week with some internal conversations with Gary and Caitlin and other people at the DOE. And then we're going to reach out and touch base with the Lieutenant Governor's office and make sure we understand their intentions and everything. So those conversations are happening, but we're looking at a similar model to the middle school grant, but maybe at a district level as opposed to a school level. But giving districts flexibility to use these funds to promote professional development for their teachers in whatever way they actually need. Well, some districts have a certified teacher, but need some more training at the elementary school level. Some districts need to send teachers to endorsement programs. So giving them that flexibility is important. Probably won't see it for another couple of months as we put together the grant and iron out all the details. But hopefully we'll have it in place by this upcoming school year. Was that all the questions?
So the other question was in terms of the amount of money. Will we've heard the number $750,000 or $1 million. Is that amount? I'm assuming over the next several years that you all will have. You will find out how much is available per year.
Yeah, we'll have to find out how much is available per year. I did hear the 750 number as well, so it's probably closer to that. But and I'm learning a lot about our budget process, and it's not my area of expertise, but I get to learn a lot now that I'm involved in this conversation. That something like this, once appropriations are created, it becomes a line item in the education budget, and it resides there until somebody decides that we want to move money and move that out the way and do something else with it. So hopefully it'll be there for a couple more years, and we can get as many teachers trained as possible over the next few years. I also wanted to point out when Errika was talking about the broadband grant, that both the broadband grant and the broadband legislation and the computer science legislation received wide acceptance across the Senate board. So like the computer science was 100%. So this is clearly bipartisan, and it doesn't matter what party you're from or what part of the state you live in. Everybody recognizes that this is important and invaluable to the development of our children and the progression of our state, in addition to the progression of our country. But at least in Georgia, we can clearly see that it's an us thing where everybody's included and everybody's involved and everybody wants to push this needle forward.
Great. Errika, did you have anything to add to my questions around money? Okay, great. Anyone else have any questions? I always have some in my bank.
Harry just asked a question on the chat about the CTAE, the middle school grant. Was it only sent to CTAE folks? Initially, yes, Terry, although towards the end of and this grant has a real quick turnaround. Like it's a month worth of solicitation before it's due. So initially it was just pushed out through the CTAE department, and then eventually I put it on my EdWeb. But like I said, it was so quick as far as the turnaround that it it was fast.
Yeah. Great.
Another question now. Is there an exemplar for program goal setting? Yes, there are some districts that are pioneers in the state. CS for Georgia and the DOE have been working with some districts as part of an A4I grant, and they've done a great job as far as creating a structure, a K-12 structure for computer science. And different districts are at different stages. Douglas County, for instance, has a commitment to doing K-12 computer science. Thomas County is doing K-12 computer science. Brooks and Ben Hill County, some rural districts, went from having absolutely no computer science whatsoever in their districts to now having some sort of experience at every level of education. So there's a lot going on. Casey's taken over in Douglas now, so he'll be our point person as far as getting computer science ramped up and rolled out effectively out in Douglas County. He's also doing some great things. But yeah, there are a lot of districts around the country. I've had some really conversations with the folks out in Paulding. They're on the call. And they have some real great programs coming up this upcoming school year. So there are some districts that you can go and look at and see what it is that they're already doing to find out exactly what would be effective in your space.
Right. And this has been something that Bryan and Dr. Dooley and I have been talking about for the last year. Dr. Dooley from the beginning, from about 3 years ago, she's one of great vision, and Bryan believed in it as well, is she used the keyword just success stories. We need people to see success stories, and she saw multiple benefits. One of is on obviously on the policy end, one of is also on the inspiration end, but also, as your question implies, she wanted people to have examples of what that looks like. What does a good CS designed effort look like? And it looks different for every situation. And so that's one of the reasons that we wrote the NSF grant, which Bryan was referring to, the Aligning for Impact grant. There's a little bit of information about it on our website. And we are going to quickly try to do as much as we can in the next couple of months to get a few examples up on our website. And so we will highlight some examples around the state, and we'll provide links to resources around the country of other great examples, so you can take a look at that. Eventually, our dream is to have videos and PDF documents of profiles of rural, suburban, urban schools, small, big, medium size, different settings, people working on equity issues across the board, people working on quality. So you can go to our website eventually and be able to take a look at very detailed information about schools and districts. So we're looking at both levels, as Bryan mentioned, that it's not just about schools, it's not just about teachers, it's also about a district working together, because each teacher at each school level is depending on other school levels to do their job together eventually. Right now, some schools have high school teachers, but there's nothing coming up the pipeline, and vice versa. So each district is trying to figure out what to do with around its high school clusters. So great, yes, there's a lot of the districts being mentioned. Any other, yes?
You want to talk about since you're talking about the district levels and the level of buy-in, you want to talk about some of the training that we've done, the script stuff?
Sure. So Erika, Bryan, and myself, we're all trained. Bryan, of course, is the expert, but Bryan's done some CS script training. So if you were to go to the CS for All Consortium website, you'll see they have a training called a CS script training, and they have become sort of pioneers in the country. That's the area they've taken a lead in, is really helping people think, districts, school districts, think about how do we have a planning tool at a district level that helps us figure out what our district needs, how to plan for it. It's a 1 to 2 day training, and it helps districts really figure out alignment, elementary, middle, and high school. So we've done it as part of our NSF grant with 5 districts: Atlanta Public Schools, Douglas County, Thomas, and in South Georgia, Thomas, Brooks, and Ben Hill. And we set out a few districts to send applications in to do it this January, and Erika and I went to it with Walker County in Northwest Georgia and with Gwinnett County in Metro Atlanta. They were selected by CS for All out of the Georgia applicants, and they've gone through the training. So that training, we're going to be trying to figure out ways to do it around the state. We'll be trying to write some grants so we can hire trainers to work with Bryan and Erika to oversee that, and that process. So Bryan, and Erika, we'll have to sort of think of some of this online idea if we can do some of that. Otherwise, because the script training, of course, was designed to do it face to face, but maybe we can talk to the CS for All people. They're great partners of ours, and I've talked to them a little bit about online. They're experimenting, like everybody mentioned. We're all trying to figure out what works online. Online sounds like magic, but like everybody said, there's challenges to online as well. Let me stop sharing that. Great. And so we're getting almost done. Anybody have any last questions about SB 108, high school, middle school requirement, PD? please feel free to type your question. One last question I had for Erika and Bryan is, what is the guidance to vendors as they try to, be helpful, and also, vendors are trying to do their work. Is there anything that they should be doing to be helpful, guiding schools and districts that are often asking them? Sometimes the vendor is their expert resource. What kind of guidance can we provide to vendors as to what should they be getting ready to do? Is there anything we can provide or DOE can provide that could be helpful to vendors as to what's going to be coming up in the next year or so as this gets implemented?
I would definitely just kind of reiterate actually what Bryan had mentioned earlier in terms of ensuring that they're, being very intentional, very proactive to align to the standards that exist, given just the due diligence and the hard work that was placed in that, and again now K through 12, leveraging that as their barometer. Many are already do so. It is in no way to say that and dismiss the great work that they already do. It's more so for those who may be new coming into the game, just ensuring that they're, regardless of the goodwill, right? Because people sometimes want to get caught up in that. It's like, oh, we're here to help. Absolutely. Oh, we're here to supplement. Thank you so much. But the best way to do that is to ensure that they're doing it to the standards that have been set. That way their work is not in vain.
Correct.
Right? So, yeah.
Well, actually, Erika, you just raised a great point. Last question, Bryan, real quick. We've got K through 8. What are the plans for Dr. Bryan Cox to lead the effort for high school standards in Georgia?
So we already have a plethora of high school courses that have standards associated with them. Most of them are in CTAE, but there are 2 IB standard courses. There are 2 AP standards. And I've gotten a lot of interest as of late from outside districts and parties that are interested in creating courses, like a data science course or a fintech course, things like that, that may or may not go into a CTAE pathway. But high school has a plethora of standards as it is right now. And we've started the conversation about how to perhaps retool them, because now that we have K-8 standards, ideally students will start coming to high school with more preparation than they have in the past. And so that will force us to be a little bit more rigorous at our high school level. So we've had those conversations. We talked a bit about it at the last advisory meeting, and we'll continue to talk about it going forward. But it's a constantly growing field, and this discipline is going to continue to move on.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Erika, very much for taking the time to represent the work of the Policy Coalition. The almost Dr. Bryan Cox, thank you very much. Lauren, for supervising him and making sure he does his thing. See, she's monitoring you by being on this call. And everybody, we had a great turnout. Clearly, this is a topic that's important, and you all, almost everybody, we had between 18 to 20 participants throughout the call. You guys have been wonderful. I've been recording it all. What's coming up next for CS for Georgia is that as Errika Moore is the TAG Ed Executive Director. So one of the things that she announced with her board chair at our February strategic planning session is that she and TAG Ed have taken the leadership to take over a lot of this coordination work. So we'll be working, Bryan and I and Dr. Dooley will be working with Erika and her board and other CS for Georgia members as we transition to implementing our strategic plan. I was apologizing to Bryan and Erika that I haven't gotten my my notes out yet. So Co will work on that. And soon we'll have a strategic plan that Erika, Bryan, and Dr. Dooley have vetted and been ready for sharing with everybody, and everybody will be looking at that. So work with us over the next year. We'll be working hard on this implementation of SB 108, this great victory, building on it, learning from schools. We'll be trying to get the success stories out there, posted online. Bryan and I will be working with our NSF grant participants to get these best practice examples up. We've got data. We've got an evaluator on that project, so we've got data from that. So we'll be basically saying, these are the lessons learned. This is what works. This is what doesn't work from these schools' experience. And here's the recommendation. So hopefully we'll be getting all of that out to you and be building our capacity so we can do more and more of that. Thank you, everybody. and we will see you online and see you face to face. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you all. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Hey, it's back to the original crew. Let me stop recording.